There are places in this world that are meant to feel safe, quiet sanctuaries passed down through generations, filled with laughter, sand between your toes, and the scent of salt in the air. For the Hendricks family, that place was a modest beach house in Delaware, a house inherited after the passing of a father who had fought a long, losing battle with cancer. The home wasn't much to look at. It wasn't a mansion, and it certainly didn't scream luxury. But it had one thing no amount of money could buy: location. Just 1 block from the boardwalk, and with an upper back deck offering a perfect ocean view, it quickly became the Hendricks' summer haven. But no one could have predicted the horror that would unfold there. Behind the wooden walls and beneath the floorboards, something else was living. This is a story of intrusion, a story of psychological torment, a story of survival. And it all began with a faint scratching sound. After the passing of his father, 40-year-old insurance agent Mark Hendricks began bringing his wife and 2 sons, Jordan 7 and Scott 5, to the beach house every summer. It became tradition, a week here, a weekend there, just enough to escape the stress of work and city life. Mark wasn't one for adventure. A family man through and through, stability was his priority. By all accounts, the Hendricks family was happy, balanced, and unremarkably ordinary. But even the most ordinary lives can be upended in a single night. It was mid-July. The family had arrived on a Sunday, planning to stay through Friday to avoid the weekend crowds. They were enjoying the calm, warm air of a quieter Wednesday evening when everything began to unravel. It was just past 9:30 p.m. The boys had fallen asleep after an exhausting day in the sun. Mark and his wife were seated on the back deck, sipping wine and playing cards by the soft glow of string lights. That's when Jordan, the eldest son, appeared in the doorway. His face was pale, his body tense. "Dad, I keep hearing scratching. In my room, I can't sleep." Mark glanced at his wife, thinking it was probably nothing, just the creaking of an old house, or maybe some beach critter nesting nearby. Still, he stood up, nodded, and followed Jordan downstairs. Jordan didn't exaggerate. He pointed at the wall near his bed and raised a finger to his lips, signaling for silence. Mark listened closely. At first, nothing. Then faint, rhythmic scratching drywall. The sound wasn't above or in the ceiling rafters. It was lower. Near the baseboards, Mark crouched and pressed his ear to the wall. That's when he heard it. Breathing. Deep, human, intentional. The kind of breathing that didn't belong to any animal. Then, without warning, an inhuman scream erupted from within the wall. A sound so guttural and enraged it defied explanation. Mark staggered back in shock. "Jesus," he blurted. Then instinct kicked in. Without hesitation, Mark grabbed Jordan's arm and yanked him from the room. Panic flooded his system. This wasn't just a strange sound. Someone was in the house. Inside the walls. He sprinted down the hallway to the room where little Scott was still fast asleep. There was no time to explain. Mark scooped him up in his arms and turned toward the stairs. As they reached the base of the staircase, Mark shouted for his wife. Then came another scream. This one was closer, louder, more real. Mark turned and saw him. A man covered in filth, hair matted, skin streaked with grime, was charging straight at them from the hallway. With a child in each arm, Mark forced his way up the stairs in a panicked scramble, feet barely touching the steps. The second he reached the deck, he slammed the sliding glass door shut behind them. The impact came instantly. The man slammed into the door with such force Mark thought it would shatter. The glass groaned beneath the pressure as the stranger clawed at it like an animal. He shrieked, pounded, smeared something, blood, dirt, across the pane as he screamed incoherent, vile threats Mark would later try to forget. Mark braced his entire body against the door, becoming a living barrier between the man and his family. His wife covered the boy's ears and dragged them to the corner, shielding them from the nightmare unfolding just a few feet away. Mark stared into the eyes of the intruder. They were wild, delirious, rage-fueled. The man didn't let up. He didn't stop. Mark was ready to fight, to kill if he had to. But help was already on its way. Red and blue lights lit up the deck within minutes. Police had entered the house from the side, quietly and swiftly. Mark saw two officers break through the hallway and tackle the man from behind. It took both of them to restrain him. He screamed and writhed, his fury unrelenting. Once secured in the back of a squad car, the nightmare finally ended for the moment. Shaken but physically unharmed, Mark gave his statement. Officers joined him in a sweep of the house, trying to determine how the man had gotten inside. What they found was beyond disturbing. Hidden beneath the back porch was a narrow entrance, nearly invisible unless someone knew where to look. It led into a standing crawl space, dark and damp, that ran along the foundation of the house. Inside that space was a second entrance, a loose panel in the back of Jordan's closet. Mark had never noticed it. He had never done a full inspection after inheriting the house. He had never refinished the rooms. The space had simply been there, waiting. The man, later identified as a vagrant with a long history of untreated mental illness and vagrancy, had been living inside the crawl space for months. He had survived off scraps, stealing food from the Hendricks pantry and from nearby trash bins. He had crept out when the house was empty, retreating back into the walls when people returned. But that week he had snapped. According to detectives, he referred to the house as his new home, and he viewed the family as intruders. He had planned to harm them that night. The Hendricks family left the house the next morning, not because they feared another attack, but because the trauma was too fresh. They didn't return for the rest of the summer. Mark hired a professional crew to seal off the crawl space completely and secure all access points. Only after that was done did he begin to breathe easier again. Now, a year later, they've returned, tentatively, cautiously, trying to rebuild what was taken from them that night, their sense of peace. But some things can't be unseen, and some walls never forget. In the world of true crime, we often think of danger as something loud, something obvious. A home invasion, a break-in, a scream in the night. But sometimes the threat is already inside, watching, waiting. The Hendricks family survived their brush with terror, but they will never be the same. And it leaves us with one chilling question. How well do you really know your home?